Fears that uncertainty over trade tariffs will trigger a recession gripped the U.S. stock market on Monday. A Reuters poll showed 91% of economists see higher recession risks due to President Donald Trump's shifting trade policies.
They'll be met with the exact same tariff.
But the White House pushed back on talk of a recession on Monday. The director of its National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, said there were many reasons to be optimistic about the U.S. economy, despite concerns about inflation and predictions of a contraction in GDP in the first quarter. He argued U.S. tax cuts would boost the economy and said Trump's tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China were already bringing manufacturing and jobs back to the U.S. Hassett and other White House officials have also repeatedly bashed the economy inherited from former President Joe Biden. But when Trump took office, GDP growth had largely exceeded trend for 2 years, consumer spending was strong, and unemployment was still near historic lows. Since then, several indicators have pointed to a softening trend, and a monthly survey of U.S. households out on Monday showed that Americans expressed more pessimism about their financial situations. Meanwhile, early economic data suggests the U.S. economy could contract in the first quarter of the year. Hassett called it a very temporary phenomenon. Trump himself declined to predict whether the U.S. could face a recession in a Fox News interview on Sunday. On Monday, economists at Goldman Sachs cut their forecast for U.S. growth this year and raised their forecast for inflation.
Syria's new government signed a deal with the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces to merge forces. That's according to the Syrian presidency Monday, releasing video showing interim Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara and SDF commander Mazloum Abdi signing the deal. It's a major step in Shara's goal to unite Syria, which had seen 14 years of conflict and the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in December. The agreement included a complete end of hostilities and for SDF-controlled civilian and military institutions, which include an airport, oil and gas fields, to become part of the Damascus administration. In the northeastern city of Komishlu, there were celebrations after the deal. Cars full of cheering people cruised through the streets in early Tuesday.
The people needed an agreement like this. The world is tired of displacement and war, so we are happy with this agreement because it will bring peace to a new democratic Syria.
The US-backed SDF has been in conflict with Turkey-backed armed groups in northern Syria for years. That conflict has rumbled on since Assad was toppled. There was no immediate comment on the deal from Turkey, which is a close ally of Shara. Analysts say SDF leaders see Monday's agreement as a hedge against the risk of the Trump administration suddenly withdrawing U.S. forces, which have helped SDF counter the Islamic State in Syria for a decade. The accord came at another critical moment. Syrian authorities face an insurgency in the coastal region of western Syria by loyalist remnants of Assad's regime. Violence has spiraled in the past week, and there were reports of large numbers of civilians of Assad's Alawite sect killed in sectarian reprisals. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Sunday condemned the killings. In a Reuters interview Monday, Shara said mass killings of Alawites were a threat to his mission to unite Syria. He promised to punish those responsible, including his own allies, if necessary. Jet fuel is pouring into the sea of northeast England after a tanker carrying fuel for the US military was struck by a container ship Monday. Two maritime security sources said so far there was no sign of malicious activity. Ships with firefighting capabilities, lifeboats, and a helicopter arrived at the scene Monday morning. Britain's Coast Guard said 36 people were rescued, but one person remained missing. The crash happened off the port city of Hull at 10 a.m. Shipping industry sources say the waterway was busy with traffic running from the ports along Britain's northeast coast to the Netherlands and Germany. The tanker, called the Stena Immaculate, is operated by U.S. logistics group Crowley. They said the vessel was anchored when it was struck by the Portuguese-flagged cargo ship Solong. The crash happened in daylight conditions. Speaking to Reuters, oceanographer Dr. Simon Boxall said it seemed avoidable.
Now, there were reports of fog earlier, but modern ships have anti-collision systems, they have radar and so on. The sterner ship could have done very little about it. It couldn't have moved away because it was at anchor. It wouldn't have had time to respond by the time it got its engines warmed up and everything else. But the Solong should have avoided it, and it would be down to incompetence on behalf of Solong. There is no reason why in the 21st century two ships should collide.
The Solong's Hamburg-based owner, Ernst Russ, said both vessels sustained significant damage from the crash and the subsequent fire. A maritime data provider's report said the Solong was carrying containers of alcohol and sodium cyanide, a toxic chemical used mainly in gold mining. A U.S. military spokesperson told Reuters on Monday the tanker Stena Immaculate had been on a short-term charter to the U.S. Navy's Military Sealift Command. It was part of a U.S. government program designed to supply the armed forces with fuel when required. An insurance specialist said the pollution risk was lower than if the tanker had been carrying crude oil, but that would depend on the number of tanks breached and the severity of the fire. A spokesperson for the activist network Greenpeace said any environmental impact would depend on factors, including the amount and type of oil carried by the tanker, the fuel carried by both ships, and how much of that, if any, had entered the water.
Russian forces advanced further in their efforts to retake the Kursk region on Monday, threatening to encircle thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, just as Kyiv prepared for talks with top US diplomats in Saudi Arabia. This video, released on Saturday by Ukraine's air assault forces, is said to show Ukrainian artillery fire targeting Russian special forces, who crept for miles through a gas pipeline to surprise Ukrainian troops holding Russian territory near Sudzha. Reuters was able to verify the location and that a gas pipeline runs underground there. This video, said to show Russian troops inside the tunnel, was posted on social media. In it, the soldiers reference March 8th and that they're heading towards Sudzha, though the date and location were not fully verifiable. Russian forces captured 3 more settlements in the area on Sunday after using the pipeline. By encircling Ukrainian soldiers, they aim to force them either to flee or to surrender in western Russia. Ukraine's air assault forces said in a post accompanying the video that enemy losses were high around Sudzha. Reuters could not independently verify that. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky was heading to Saudi Arabia for talks at a critical time for Kyiv. It will be the first official meeting between US and Ukrainian officials since a disastrous encounter between Zelensky and President Donald Trump in the Oval Office.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
Zelensky is expected to meet the Saudi Crown Prince, but has said he will not attend the talks with US negotiators, instead sending top officials including his chief of staff and foreign and defense ministers. They're expected to focus on a bilateral minerals deal and how to end the war. Trump is pressing for a swift end to the conflict and has upended US policy by pausing military aid to Ukraine and engaging directly with Moscow, raising fears among European leaders that Ukraine will lose the war.
This MRI scan of a human brain shows in red an area that could be a potential lesion and a possible cause of epilepsy. And a new artificial intelligence tool developed in the UK can help spot the sometimes minute and difficult to pinpoint abnormalities that can cause epilepsy and prompt methods of treatment.
The crucial thing is if you can find the brain abnormality, you can offer surgery which might cure the seizures. And what our AI tool can do is find 2/3 of those abnormalities that doctors might miss.
Dr. Conrad Wagstill is a senior lecturer at the School of Biomedical Engineering and Imaging Sciences, King's College London. He's worked to develop this tool called MELD Graph. It came together with the help of 23 hospitals around the world that shared their records of brain abnormalities with researchers. That helped them construct a data set on which to train the AI algorithm on what to look for.
It can take a new scan, point out where it thinks the abnormality is on that scan, and also, really importantly, how confident it is, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 that it's a brain abnormality, but also what it's using to make that decision. Is the brain a bit too thick in this area? Is it a bit brighter than it's expecting? Then a radiologist can go back to that report and have a look at the scan and say, yes, I think this is causing the seizures. Maybe we can discuss surgery now.
Epilepsy affects around 1 out of every 100 people globally, with 1 in 5 epilepsy cases being caused by a structural abnormality in the brain. The variations can be minuscule.
An MRI scan is maybe 10 million pixels, and they're looking for something that's maybe 100 pixels at its smallest, and that can be very subtle. So for context, if you took an example might be a novel, a 200-page novel, there's 100,000 words in it, and they're looking for one word that's slightly the wrong size or slightly the wrong font. And so you could see how having an AI to point out potential areas can really speed up that process and also pick up things they might have missed.
While the tool is not yet clinically available, the team has made the software open source and is training clinicians and researchers worldwide on its use.